A woman in a simple beige dress stood motionless as laughter rippled through the grand ballroom. Who brought her? Someone murmured, loud enough to carry. The crème de la crème of Chicago society glanced her way with barely concealed disdain, their champagne flutes gleaming under crystal chandeliers. Little did they know that Emily Harrison was about to shatter their carefully constructed world with a single stroke of her pen. The unassuming billionaire Emily M. Harrison had never been one for ostentation. At 36, she lived in a modest townhouse in Chicago's Lincoln Park neighborhood, drove a 12-year-old Honda, and favored local coffee shops over Michelin-starred restaurants. Her wardrobe consisted primarily of practical essentials, simple dresses, sensible shoes, and well-worn sweaters that had served her faithfully for years. Few people suspected that this unassuming woman had built medtech innovations from scratch into a billion-dollar enterprise that revolutionized healthcare data systems across North America. Emily preferred to remain in the shadows, letting her business partner, Jonathan, handle public relations and media appearances. "You're the genius," under spokesperson Jonathan often quipped, and Emily was perfectly content with this arrangement. On this particular Thursday afternoon, Emily sat cross-legged on her office floor, surrounded by stacks of documents. Her company had just completed another stellar quarter, and she was evaluating potential charitable initiatives to support oncology research, educational programs, affordable housing projects, she muttered, carefully examining each folder. Her assistant, Sarah, observed from the doorway. "You know, most CEOs delegate their philanthropy decisions to specialized departments," she remarked, setting a cup of green tea beside her boss. Emily smiled without looking up. Most CEOs don't care where their charitable contributions actually end up. The truth was, philanthropy wasn't merely a tax strategy for Emily. It was deeply personal. 18 years ago, her younger brother Lucas had succumbed to lymphoma. She'd watched helplessly as medical expenses destroyed her parents' finances, despite their decades of honest work. That experience had shaped both her business vision and her commitment to meaningful giving. "There's a vast difference between writing checks and creating real change," Emily often said. She had donated millions over the years, always anonymously, directly to causes she'd thoroughly researched, with minimal fanfare and no buildings bearing her name. Her phone vibrated. A message from David Chen, a former software architect who had worked for her company before transitioning to the Children's Oncology Research Alliance. "Just confirming your attendance tomorrow evening. The Chen Foundation Gala is our biggest fundraiser of the year. We're hoping to raise enough for the new research facility." Emily hesitated. She avoided high society events religiously. Too much superficial conversation, too many judgmental glances at her modest attire and unpolished manners. But David had been an exceptional employee, and the cause resonated profoundly with her. "I'll be there," she texted back, already feeling anxiety knot in her stomach. "Preparation and prejudice. You're actually going." Sarah's eyes widened as she stood in Emily's office doorway the following morning. "You despise these society functions." Emily continued working on her laptop without looking up. "The Chen Gala supports pediatric oncology research. Lucas would have been 30 this year." Her voice softened at the mention of her brother. Sarah nodded, understanding immediately. "What will you wear?" This made Emily pause. Her wardrobe wasn't exactly filled with gala-appropriate attire. "I have that beige dress from Jonathan's wedding. It's only 4 years old, and I've worn it exactly once." "It's perfectly fine," Sarah sighed, knowing better than to push. Emily Harrison, worth billions on paper, shopped during clearance sales and kept clothes until they disintegrated. A habit from her childhood when every penny counted. Later that afternoon, David called, his voice bubbling with enthusiasm. "Emily, I can hardly believe you're actually coming. I've placed you at table 19. "Not at the front, I hope," Emily said, immediately concerned. David laughed. No, I know you better than that. It's toward the back, but still an excellent table. The Worthingtons will be there. They run that investment group downtown. And the Sinclair family, they're major donors. Sounds fine, Emily replied, though the thought of making small talk with Chicago's elite made her stomach churn. Just don't introduce me as MedTech's CEO. As far as anyone knows, I'm just an old friend who works in technology. Promise. After hanging up, Emily stared at the silent phone, wondering if she'd made a mistake. Events like the Gala were notorious for their hierarchy. People were judged by their attire, their jewelry, their connections. It represented everything Emily despised. But then she thought of children in oncology wards, just as Lucas had been. She thought of terrified parents sending documents they couldn't afford, mortgaging homes, exhausting savings, all for a chance to save their child. It's just one evening, she told herself firmly. Into the lion's den at 7 o'clock the next evening, Emily stood before her bathroom mirror, appraising her reflection critically. The beige dress was simple but elegant, with a modest neckline and pearl buttons down the front. Her auburn hair fell in natural waves to her shoulders. She hadn't bothered with a stylist. Her only makeup was a touch of mascara and natural lipstick. No jewelry except her grandmother's modest gold earrings. No designer handbag, just a simple clutch. She looked presentable, certainly not like someone who could write a check for millions without hesitation. Her phone chimed with a text from the car service. David had insisted on sending a car, though Emily would have been perfectly content taking public transportation. As the sleek black sedan pulled away from her townhouse, Emily felt oddly vulnerable. In her everyday life, she moved through the world unrecognized, unnoticed. Her wealth was abstract, numbers on a statement, not something visible on her person. Tonight, she would be entering a world where worth was measured by appearance, where her simple dress and bare wrists would immediately mark her as an outsider. The Drake Hotel, ma'am, the driver confirmed, meeting her eyes in the rearview mirror. Emily nodded, a strange sense of foreboding settling over her. Yes, the Gala. As the car glided through Chicago's evening traffic, she mentally prepared herself for what was to come, unaware that this night would conclude very differently than she imagined. Among the elite, the Drake Hotel ballroom had been transformed into an opulent wonderland. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light over tables adorned with elaborate floral centerpieces. A string ensemble played softly in the corner, their music nearly drowned out by the buzz of conversation and the delicate clink of champagne glasses. Emily stood at the entrance, invitation clutched tightly in hand. Already she felt out of place. Women draped in couture gowns and glittering diamonds air-kissed each other, while men in custom tuxedos discussed market portfolios and Mediterranean yachts. Name, please. The hostess at the check-in table wore a practiced smile. Emily Harrison. The woman scanned her list, her perfectly manicured nail moving down the page. Harrison. Ah, yes. Table 19. Her smile faltered slightly as she took in Emily's simple appearance. In the back, she added unnecessarily. Emily thanked her and moved into the crowd, acutely aware of the sidelong glances. She could almost hear the unspoken questions. Who is she? Why is she dressed like that? Doesn't she know this is a black tie event? Emily. David's familiar voice cut through her discomfort. He appeared beside her, looking distinguished in his tuxedo. You made it. I said I would, she replied, genuinely happy to see her former employee. David had been one of her best programmers before his wife's battle with cancer had inspired him to change careers. Come, let me show you to your table. The auction starts in an hour, and the speaker lineup is incredible. His enthusiasm was contagious, momentarily distracting Emily from her self-consciousness. As they wove through tables, Emily noticed the shift in atmosphere. Near the entrance, where the premium tables were located, the guests radiated old money and influence. The farther back they walked, the less rarefied the air became. Table 19 was positioned near the back of the ballroom, as promised. Already seated were 3 couples, all impeccably dressed and deep in conversation. They looked up as David approached. "Everyone, this is my friend Emily Harrison," David announced. "Emily, meet the Worthingtons, the Sinclairs, and the Montgomerys." A chorus of polite hellos followed. Though Emily didn't miss the quick assessments, the raised eyebrows, the exchanged glances. She'd seen it all before, the instant evaluation and dismissal. "Emily works in technology," David added before being called away by another guest. "How interesting," said Mrs. Worthington, a slim woman with platinum hair twisted into an elaborate chin. "What exactly do you do?" "Software development," Emily replied simply, taking her seat. She'd learned long ago that less information led to fewer questions. "My grandson is into computers," Mr. Sinclair commented, as if technology were a childish hobby rather than a global industry. Conversation resumed around her, with Emily occasionally nodding or offering brief responses when directly addressed. She was used to this, being overlooked, underestimated. Usually, it didn't bother her. Tonight, though, surrounded by people who measured worth by appearances, it stung more than she cared to admit. The judgment as dinner progressed, Emily became increasingly invisible to her tablemates. They discussed vacation properties in Aspen, private school admissions, and country club memberships, conversations deliberately designed to exclude outsiders. Midway through the main course, a commotion near the front caught everyone's attention. A photographer was capturing images of the VIP tables, with guests posing elegantly beside the event's major donors. Who invited her? The question, just loud enough to be heard, came from a woman at the adjacent table who was staring directly at Emily. The woman's companions turned to look, not bothering to hide their amusement at Emily's plain dress and simple hairstyle. A ripple of laughter spread, and Emily found herself the center of unwanted attention. Probably someone's assistant who got confused about the date. A man in an expensive suit stage whispered, generating more laughter. Emily sat perfectly still, her face expressionless, though her chest tightened painfully. The moment stretched on, a frozen tableau with her at the center of cruel amusement. David, noticing the commotion from across the room, started making his way toward her table, concern etched on his face. But before he could reach her, the evening's host tapped the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention, please. It's time to begin our pledge drive for the new Children's Oncology Research Center." The laughter subsided, though Emily could still feel eyes on her. She took a deep breath, reminding herself why she was here. It wasn't about these people or their opinions. It was about the children fighting cancer, about families like hers had been. With renewed resolve, she straightened her shoulders and focused on the stage, ignoring the whispers that continued around her. The turning point as the pledge drive began, a compelling promotional video played on large screens throughout the ballroom. Images of children battling cancer filled the room, their brave smiles, their hopeful eyes, their parents' love and determination. The video ended with an architectural rendering of the proposed research center, a state-of-the-art facility that would help develop new treatments. "Our goal tonight," announced the host, "is to raise $8 million toward the $16 million needed to break ground." "Who'll start us off?" Hands began to rise, with donations ranging from 5 to 6 figures. Each pledge was met with applause, the larger ones earning standing ovations. At table 19, the Worthingtons pledged $75,000 to appreciative murmurs. The Sinclairs followed with $100,000, while the Montgomerys offered $150,000. "And you, dear?" Mrs. Worthington turned to Emily with a condescending smile. "Perhaps you could manage 200. Every little bit helps." Emily didn't respond to the jab. Instead, she studied the pledge card before her, calculating in her head. The children in the video reminded her so much of Lucas. Their thinning hair, their wise beyond their years' eyes, their fragile bodies housing indomitable spirits. Daniel appeared at her side looking apologetic. "I'm so sorry about all this," he whispered. "I had no idea they would be so." "It's fine," Emily interrupted gently. "The cause is what matters." He nodded gratefully. "The foundation does amazing work. Every dollar goes directly to research, not administrative costs or fancy parties." He gestured around the ballroom with a wry smile. "Who oversees the research program?" Emily asked. "Dr. Margaret Chen. She's brilliant. Developed a treatment protocol that's improved survival rates by 40% in some aggressive childhood cancers. She's here tonight." David pointed to a modest Asian woman in a simple navy dress speaking with the host. Something in Dr. Chen's focused expression reminded Emily of herself. The look of someone more concerned with substance than appearance. As David was called away again, Emily noticed Victoria Worthington watching her with thinly veiled contempt. "It's remarkable, isn't it?" Mrs. Worthington said loudly to her companions. "How some people attend these events without contributing meaningfully, almost as if they're here for the free dinner." The table erupted in muffled laughter, which died abruptly when Emily finally spoke. "I was just thinking the same thing," she said calmly, meeting Mrs. Worthington's gaze. "About people who seem more interested in being seen than in actually helping children." Mrs. Worthington's face flushed crimson. "Well, I never." But she was interrupted by the host's voice booming through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're now at 5 million. We're still 3 million short of tonight's goal. Who will help us close the gap?" Emily quietly raised her hand, though no one at her table noticed. "Yes, the lady in the beige dress at table 19, the host called out, pointing directly at Emily. All eyes turned toward the back of the room. Emily stood, her posture relaxed but confident. "And your pledge amount, ma'am?" the host prompted, pen poised over his notepad. $20 million, Emily stated clearly. The revelation, a stunned silence fell over the ballroom. The host blinked rapidly, as if he'd misheard. "I'm sorry. Did you say 20 million?" Emily repeated. "That should cover the entire research center, with substantial funding left for operating costs and additional research grants." Whispers erupted across the room. At table 19, Mrs. Worthington's champagne glass froze halfway to her lips. Mr. Sinclair's jaw literally dropped. The host fumbled with his notes. That's incredibly generous, Ms. Harrison." "Emily Harrison," she confirmed. A man near the front suddenly stood up, his face lighting with recognition. "Wait, Emily Harrison of MedTech Innovations." The whispers grew louder. Emily nodded once, maintaining her composure. "The Emily Harrison," the man continued, his voice carrying across the now silent room. "The founder and CEO who revolutionized healthcare data integration. Forbes' most innovative tech leader 3 years running?" "Yes," David confirmed proudly, stepping forward. "That's exactly who she is." The atmosphere in the ballroom shifted dramatically. Faces that had been dismissive or mocking moments ago now showed shock, embarrassment, and in some cases, a hasty recalibration to respect. Dr. Margaret Chen pushed through the crowd, approaching Emily with genuine emotion in her eyes. "Ms. Harrison, your software has already saved countless lives by identifying treatment patterns we never would have seen otherwise. And now this donation." She seemed at a loss for words. Victoria Worthington stood abruptly, nearly knocking over her chair. "Emily, I had no idea. We had no idea." "Clearly," Emily replied simply. "Mr. Sinclair attempted damage control. If we had known who you were, then you would have treated me differently," Emily finished for him. "That's precisely the problem, isn't it?" The Montgomerys looked at their plates, too mortified to speak. Around them, the room buzzed with activity as people tried to position themselves closer to Emily, suddenly eager to be associated with the unassuming billionaire in their midst. "The lesson, ladies and gentlemen," the host announced, his voice cracking with emotion. "Thanks to the extraordinary generosity of Ms. Emily Harrison, founder of MedTech Innovations, we have not only met our goal for the evening, but exceeded it. The Chen Children's Oncology Research Center will become a reality. The ballroom erupted in applause, though many of the clapping hands belonged to people who had been laughing at Emily only minutes before. As the initial shock wore off, the ballroom became a flurry of activity. The event photographer who had pointedly ignored Emily earlier now hovered nearby, angling for a shot. Guests who had whispered behind their hands now approached with business cards and effusive compliments. Through it all, Emily maintained her quiet dignity. She spoke at length with Dr. Chen about the research center's priorities, genuinely engaged in the conversation while politely but firmly deflecting social climbers. Victoria Worthington made 3 separate attempts to reintroduce herself. Each one met with Emily's courteous but distant acknowledgement. "I hope there are no hard feelings," Mrs. Worthington eventually said, her voice honeyed with false warmth. "If I'd only known who you were." "That's exactly the point, isn't it?" Emily interrupted gently. "We shouldn't need to know someone's net worth to treat them with basic courtesy." Mrs. Worthington flushed, opening her mouth to respond, but finding no words. Near the end of the evening, Emily found herself momentarily alone with David. "You could have told them who I was," she said. "Saved me from being the evening's entertainment." David shook his head. "Would you have wanted that? To be treated differently because of your money rather than who you are?" Emily smiled genuinely for the first time that evening. As she prepared to leave, the host asked if she would like to address the crowd. Emily hesitated, then stepped up to the microphone. "My brother Lucas died of lymphoma when he was 12, she said simply. "Tonight isn't about me or my donation. It's about ensuring other families don't experience what mine did. Judge people by their character, not their clothes or their bank accounts. Sometimes the person you least expect is the one with the most to offer." With those words, she handed Dr. Chen a check, nodded once to the silent crowd, and walked out of the ballroom, leaving Chicago's elite to reflect on the woman they had so quickly dismissed. Some battles are won not with loud confrontation, but with quiet dignity. Emily Harrison taught Chicago's elite a powerful lesson about judging others by appearance, a reminder we all need sometimes.